It's another business day. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversations right here on Business Morning. I'm Ini John McQuarrie. Let's do business. And of course, we start from the global space, seeing what's happening with the global oil prices. The edge higher today. Middle East tension has flared up with the U.S. attacking Iran, and Tehran is targeting Washington allies in the Gulf. They have already started that. So we see that increase back again, the green color for Brent. It's 0.11% up at $93.20 a barrel. WTI has also gained 0.29% at $90.33 a barrel. Kuwait shot its airspace and intercepted projectiles on Thursday, while Israel has warned of launches from Lebanon toward communities in the country's north. The latest escalation follows U.S. strikes on Iranian military infrastructure ordered by President Donald Trump. The Central Command has said this, that they are targeting surveillance, communications, and air defense assets that pose a threat to American forces and commercial shipping in regional waters. And despite the escalation in the U.S.-Iran conflict, we see that oil markets was better. Yeah, well, one would have thought that would have gone above $100. Now, we've seen that before, but not so bad. Let's find out. Maybe Mr. Rwani knows why it's not as bad as we thought. The Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rwani. Mr. Rwani, good morning. Welcome to the program. Yeah, so I cannot hear you, Mr. Rwani. Do you want to check if you're mute or something?
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now. That's okay now. Yes,
right.
Great. So, I mean, yeah, we're just wondering, with this new escalation, one would have thought that Brent at least will hit $100, but we see it's still at 93, and we've gone past this before. What do you think that the impact is not as bad as it used to be?
Back in the day, there used to be a nursery rhyme that says that the guy who cries wolf all the time, and then when the wolf comes, he's not there. We've had this situation. So the markets have discounted, now there's going to be a truce, now there's going to be, all hell is going to break loose. So they discounted that, and what it has done, it has reduced the volatility, and even at 93, what it tells you is that this price is going to come down to about 90 or even not 85 in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So for us in Nigeria, what we're looking at is that if this price comes down to 85, how will it affect us? Our break-even point, fiscal break-even point, is about $80. So we'll still be in the money. That is, the government will have money, and the revenues and the naira will strengthen at that level. 2, that it will also enable Dangote refinery and other refineries to bring down the price of commodities. So basically, a drop in the price of oil, while it reduces government revenues, it also reduces the inflation pressure on the Nigerian people. In any case, the people were hardly benefiting initially from an increase in government revenue.
But Mr. Rwani, do you see a situation? Do you see a situation where the world becomes immune to the impact of this war? I mean, the Russia-Ukraine war is still on. We know what happened at the beginning. We saw commodities, wheat and all of them skyrocketing. But at this time, we hardly know that the war is going on. Do you see the world getting to that stage with this Tehran or Iran and Washington war?
No, I think we have to understand something. What has happened is that the amount of oil being produced has not dropped. It is the amount of oil that is going through the Strait of Hormuz, which is 20%. And what were people doing? People were using the oil they were buying that came through the Strait of Hormuz or anywhere else to fill up their strategic reserves. So it was when the strategic reserves fell below the, what we can call the safe point, that people started buying. Now China and others are now saying if we buy expensive oil and the price of oil comes down, it will take the average cost of our crude oil in our strategic reserves higher. So let us not deceive ourselves. The price of a commodity is the interaction between supply and demand. The supply of oil has not reduced. As a matter of fact, OPEC has increased its supply, and the demand is almost the same. So all you are saying is the logistics problem that we are having because people cannot go through the Strait of Hormuz. So I don't think we should get too excited about the fact that the price has stayed very high. But what we must understand is that even at $85 or $90 a barrel, it is far higher. It's at least 50 or 60% higher than what the projections were in January this year when we were projecting $60, $55. So $92 is at least 60, in fact, almost 70% higher than what our projections were. So we are still, Nigeria as a country is still in the money. And you will see that if you look at what the IMF is saying in its Article 4 review, said, yes, use the windfall, but do not go into complex, opaque transactions, which makes fiscal transparency more difficult to enforce.
Yeah, and I'm glad that the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy acknowledged those concerns raised by IMF, from that article. I mean, and we saw his response while noting some of the positives of the economy. He also noted that some of those concerns and what the government is doing about it. But, Mr. Rwani, whether the price of oil moves higher or not, we still see the impact in inflation. Yesterday, we saw U.S. inflation for a third consecutive month increasing. Obviously, Nigerian inflation cannot be on the other side. So, and when the U.S. goes one way, most of the economies follow. So obviously, whether it is increasing to above $100 or not, talking about the price of oil, inflation numbers will still reflect that there's a war going on affecting a major commodity, a major global economy, commodity.
I understand, but the reality is that there's inflation that comes as a result of a transient exogenous factor, like a shock. What's happening is a shock. And there's inflation which is structural, which comes from fundamental structural rigidities within the economy. So let me first of all talk about the fact that Taiwo Idele acknowledged it, which is good. Taiwo Idele does not have a phobia for IMF or Washington consensus policies. He only means that he's a guru for fiscal transparency, and therefore we expect him to continue that way, and that is good for the country. But when you talk about inflation and anchoring inflation expectations, the reality is that in the US, inflation going up to 4.2, which is pretty high, is acknowledged to be as a result of a shock. And what has happened is that this has happened because, and we have next week the Federal Reserve meeting. What the problem now is that will the Federal Reserve maintain status quo, or will they increase against the expectations before of a decrease? So you could see that the stock markets and all of that have priced in the fact that there could be an increase. But if it maintains status quo, then you will see the stock market and asset values actually increase, which is good for us. Coming back to Nigeria, if you see our FDC's projection is for 15.8, right? And going from 15.6, you will see that it will be the third increase, consecutive monthly increase. But it's increasing at a slower pace, which means that Nigerian policies have been able to absorb some of the shocks. But what we do see is after the planting, when we get into the planting season now, we are going to see food prices increase. We've seen food prices increase in the last week, tomatoes, pepper, gari, and some other things. So we've seen that happen. What has helped us is that we imported some commodities, which brought down the imported price, but it disrupts employment and output, domestic output. So we cannot depend on supplementary imports to come in to hold prices down, because that's only temporary. The point is that we have to go to the fundamental issues that lead to inflation, which is insecurity in the food basket, in the food planting area, the lack of power supply. There have been massive power outages in the last couple of weeks. And then also we have to manage money supply growth. So in all of these things, there is a plan, I think, and especially from the Central Bank of Nigeria and the monetary policy authorities, to have a data-based inflation management technique. They've had inflation targeting as the framework, and also managing these outcomes. So generally speaking, I don't fear too much about having hyper or spiraling inflation, but I do fear that some of the leakages and fiscal problems that we've had and opaque transactions, we have to unwind those ones and allow the country maintain macroeconomic stability, sound and safe policies, and also to be much more transparent with the Nigerian public.
So, Mr. Rory, I'd like for you to, I don't know if you read through Mr. Oyedele's response, because, part of what he responded to, which is the concern of IMF, is the issue of welfare and poverty. And now we're talking about the price of commodities. And yes, the rate of increase is not very volatile, but the people are still feeling it. It's still drawing down on purchasing power and the level of poverty. So he did note there that there's some moves and plans ongoing and, the ones that are coming to deal with the issue of poverty. I wonder if you could comment on perhaps what he said, that's Mr. Oyedele, compared to the reality and what we could be doing to actually douse some of this pain coming from the global geopolitical space.
I understand very clearly. The truth is that there's a lag between when you make policies and when the impact is felt. And there's also a lag between when the impact is felt and whether people believe you. So we have three gaps here. One, identifying that there's inflation, and we did that now. Two, putting in place some measures, and the time between when we put in those measures and when people feel it. But the most important lag here is the credibility lag. The people do not believe. But it doesn't matter who, even if you brought the Pope down to Nigeria to run the Ministry of Finance, the people will not believe it right now because what they are feeling is different from what they're hearing. So over the years and over the decades, Nigerian government, both federal and state governments, have lost credibility because while on one hand we preach sacrifice, on the other hand people are living large, and people, they can see it. It's not what you say, it's what you do that is more important. So I think that is the key thing. And what Taiwo Oyedele has done is to say, okay, now we are going to walk the talk. We are going to do this, and we are going to have a situation where there will be less waste, less leakages, and also we will be responding very quickly. But the question of security is an issue which is outside the hands of the fiscal authorities. The security issue has things to do with how credible, how effective you can nip security before it happens, and also if the security agencies are compromised in any form, way, form, or manner, then you have to deal with the compromise within the system. If not, you'll just be, wasting your time. So I'm confident that the IMF report and Taiwo Oyedele's response and the reality gives us hope that the fiscal waste will reduce, the monetary policy stance will continue, the currency continues to strengthen, and oil price, even if it comes down to $80 a barrel, will still leave Nigeria with positive cash flow. Don't forget the reserves are above $50 billion, where it used to be much, much lower in the past few years. So generally speaking, from a policy perspective, from an implementation perspective, there should be some light at the end of the tunnel.
All right, we'll look for that light, Mr. Bismarck Rowani. Thank you so much. Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company.
Thank you for having me.
Let's see the market. I know Mr. Rowani told me not to be wearing red, but unfortunately I have red on today. I didn't remember. But anyways, we saw that the market closed positive yesterday. The all-share gained 0.06%, which is not a normal thing for us these days. We've been seeing more of the red color. But yesterday, we thank God there was a recovery, and volume, value, and trade, however, were in the red. Top gainers yesterday, we saw Livestock, Deep Cap, and Abbey Buildings. Abbey Buildings is still shining since they received that license to become a commercial bank. A lot of investors are looking their way. On the top losers, we have Nemeth, Intelligence, and John Holt. Top trades were Sterling, as well as FCMB and Access Core. Access Core is still struggling to regain the 25 naira for a share price, which it's been known for a long time. But we'll see how it goes. I don't know if to say this is that light, but yesterday was positive. We'll see what today holds. Hopefully, I will not be able to influence the color of the market. And then from Nigeria, so we're still in Nigeria, but now the African Development Bank They've committed $86 million to support the country's special agro-industrial processing zones program. And that's a key initiative that's aimed at boosting food production and agricultural processing. The funding will be used to develop processing facilities, reduce post-harvest losses, and improve links between farmers and the market. The program is expected to attract private investment, create jobs, and raise incomes in farming communities. The AfDB says that the initiative will also support Nigeria's efforts to reduce food imports and build a more competitive agricultural sector. The Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of International News Media Association, INMA, Mr. L. Wilkinson, is making a tour around media houses or media organizations in Africa. And the aim is to strategize to grow revenue, audience, and brand amid profound market change. He was in Channels Television yesterday, and after his meeting with executive members, members of the management of Channels Television included the Managing Director, Current Affairs and News, Mr. Ambrose Oko, as well as the General Manager, Academy and Special Duties, Mr. Tony Uranta. Well, I had to sit down with him to find out his observations so far on the continent, and perhaps he has some strategies for sustainability and revenue boosting.
I would say no ownership is the same. So one of the strange things, I'm used to a little more homogeneity around the world, and here I've been in a market where no two are alike. So I'm kind of curious at the end of next week what the lead to the story has been. I think that there are some similarities. One of the things that I have found in Nigerian media companies is a dual face, a face for local markets, a very traditional role. I would even put your company in that bucket, but also an aspiration to look outside of Nigeria to a diaspora that is influential and frankly sometimes affluent. And so I would say that dual face role is very interesting to me.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
Oh, it's a great thing for advertisers because you're still in the reach business. In other Western markets, they have subscription models that are wildly successful in some markets, not so wildly successful in other markets. Subscriptions don't seem to work as well in Africa. I think the only exception that I've seen are business newspapers. So I think that media companies are going like crazy to figure out monetization. And I think the money over the horizon is probably content licensing, deals with AI company that these companies are ingesting your content. They've already ingested your content. Now the question is, can you extract money for that moving forward? I would not budget for it, but I would say it's coming in the next 3 to 5 years.
And that was yesterday right here at Channel Studio. Now, the Nigeria Revenue Service has launched a digital platform tagged Rev360, which is designed to enhance interaction between taxpayers and the service. The chairman of the service, Mr. Zaka Didiji, says that the system integrates taxpayer registration, filing, and payment processing, among others, and it's to support a single-window digital system. He believes that the platform will impact revenue generation for the government.
Following the implementation of the new tax laws in the country, the Nigeria Revenue Service is evolving ways to maximize the laws, and the launch of the Rev360 platform is part of that effort.
Why exactly are we doing that?
Since the January 1st, 2026 implementation, the government and private institutions have organized several forums to deliberate on how to make more revenue accrue to the government. The digital platform is expected to encourage interaction between tax authorities and the public.
Nigeria Revenue Service is no more an accounting agency. It's now a technology agency. This is the future. And it's not for us to dream the future. We just have to build that future. And I think that is what NRS is doing today. we are building the future that we want for ourselves.
While the nation's tax administration system continues to evolve, the government is looking at a future where tax payment will be seamless as part of plans to ensure that the revenue has impact on the lives of the people.
The Tinubu administration is committed to seeing this economy well above $1 trillion. And these are the building blocks I've mentioned. We're looking at Rev 360. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here. I've mentioned the national single window and many other reforms of this administration. And so with those few words, I would say this morning, congratulations to us all.
When tax administration becomes more efficient, compliance becomes easier. When compliance becomes easier, businesses can focus more on growth and predictability. When institutions become more transparent and predictable, investors becomes confidence, and when government are able to mobilize domestic resources more effectively, they are better positioned to invest in infrastructure, public services, and long-term development.
The launch of the Rev 360 is expected to add to the success currently experienced in tax administration in the country. Sarah Achimugu, Channels Television News.
Yeah, well, tax reforms and revenue generation is a big one in Nigeria at this time. But of course, on the citizen side, then there's the revenue allocation and the efficiency of that. And talking about revenue in the oil and gas sector through investment is our next focus. We see for the first quarter of this year, inflows stood at $460,000, mostly foreign capital. But that's a good one compared to a quarter last year, almost 300% higher than what we had, because then we had 120,000 recorded in the first quarter of 2025, which was less than 1% of the country's total of 10.37 billion in the first quarter inflows. And of course, it was heavily dominated by portfolio investments, which we know can leave at any time through the money market. Full year 2025, we saw the sector recorded $17.98 million in capital inflows for the entire year. This was a notable tripling from the historic low of 5.12% in 2024, but it underscores the actual liquid foreign direct investment into the sector that remains constrained. However, when you look at the potential, it's placed at about $22 billion. What are we missing out in our petroleum sector? Attracting the right capital, foreign versus domestic. Let's speak this morning with the Managing Director of Policy Management Consult Services, Mr. Jide Olatuyi. Mr. Olatuyi joins us from our Abuja studio. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. So when you see these numbers of investments attracted to our petroleum sector, are you happy? Have we done enough? But when we look at the comparison, we see that we've had positive trajectory. So can we relax? Are we good?
Okay. Yes. So it's both ways. If we say, can we relax, or are we good? No. I can't say as far as oil and gas sector is concerned that we're good. Because when you look at the overall investment portfolio, overall investment, foreign direct investment in Nigeria, the portfolio is as huge as almost $10 billion. Yeah. So when you look at diaspora remittances, that is a bit even higher than that. So, yes, the economy may be responding generally to some of the few reforms that the current government has been able to put in place. But you see that when you look at it holistically, we have the non-oil sector performing more than the oil and gas sector. So that's why you have, out of almost $10 billion that is coming in the first quarter of 2026, you have only $460,000. And that 400, like you rightly said, it's a little bit on the high side. It's simply because of the war in the Arabian countries. So we have that increase is coming. But you see the investors, as far as they are concerned in the oil and gas sector, they are witnessing what we might call, some sort of caution as far as that sector is concerned. So you see that 460 comparing it to the over 10 billion US dollars that the non-oil sector has been able to get for Nigeria in terms of foreign direct investment. So we're not good enough yet, but I think it's also an indication for government to look at its governance mechanisms, its trust mechanism, the confidence that people should build in the oil and gas sector to be able to accrue or take more money or more revenues, from the oil and gas sector. So 460,000 US dollars is not, it might improve, marginally, but we are not there yet in terms of its major, when you compare it with the total volume of foreign direct investment or total volume of revenue that government is getting from outside this country, is very, very insignificant. So there is more for government to do in that sector.
Yeah, and news around town talks about the bidding process for the Amupe-Escravos pipeline, that also shows or is a fruit of one of the lack of confidence because there was previously a bid for about 40% stake in the pipeline, and now we're hearing something else. What's the latest about that? And what really are some of the concerns that investors have?
Okay, so like you rightly said, there's a bid for 40% stake as far as that the Amupe-Escravos pipeline is concerned, 40% in 2024. So it's valued at 243 million US dollars, if I'm correct. But unfortunately, that contract bid, the proposals, failed. It failed woefully. They couldn't continue with it. So
do we have reasons why it failed?
The government.
Do we have reasons why it failed? The reason for the failure?
Yeah, one of the key reasons why they said it failed was the inability to meet the contractual terms for the project. So it failed, and that contract was eventually terminated. Now, there is a new bidding process that is now being revived, and being revived to more like resuscitate that 243 million US dollars that was the initial valuation of that project. That was 243 million US dollars in 2024. There's a new valuation that was conducted in 2025 of that same project. And it's run almost to close to 642 million US dollars. So you see that there's a lot of, what we call the valuation gap.
So is this,
in the process, trying to revive a dead,
So what are the concerns? What are the concerns of investors? Because we've seen a lot of move by the government when it comes to pipelines. The AKK is almost done, and we're having a new rhythm when it comes to the use of pipeline infrastructure in the oil and gas sector. So what are the concerns of investors in this, and what are some of the consequences if this doesn't go through?
Well, their major concern is simple. Look, the contract as far as that pipeline project, the Amupe-Escravos project, pipeline project is concerned, is already done deal, is terminated. It's due. I mean, they're saying that there is a need for a new process, a competitive bidding process to commence, instead of resuscitating a dead contract. What they are saying, the lenders are saying, like Sterling Bank, Amcon, and the other, other lenders that is interested in this project, they're saying that there is no need to revive a dead contract. Let's start a new competitive process that will take into cognizance the new valuation of that project from $243 million US to almost $641 million.
All right,
So that we
Lati,
can now have a new valuation, a new bidding, competitive bidding based on the 2025 updated valuation, price value.
Mr. Lati, do I hear concerns about perhaps sentiments being attached to this bidding and resuscitation or new bidding? Is this one of the concerns of investors, that perhaps there's some sentiments being attached to the decision to resuscitate the old bidding process?
No, I don't think it's about sentiment at all. It's not even about the business transaction, as you say, a failed business transaction. I think basically it's about the governance system, in the oil and gas system. Just like we were trying to say earlier, that Nigeria received very minimum level of income or revenue from oil and gas overall as at Q1 2026 because of lack of governance, poor governance. Because if you are not committed to transparency, one, it's a problem for investors. If you cannot build trust and confidence in that sector, it's a problem. Capital flows to where certainty and predictability is. People who cannot, have confidence in the system or the governance mechanism as far as oil and gas sector is concerned in Nigeria, cannot come and maybe invest, or contribute to the oil and gas sector as far as we have it here. So it's more of a governance issue. How do we have trust in the process? How do we start a new process that is competitive? How do we have confidence in the contractual, validity of the contract terms that was, terminated, and a new one that is upcoming? How do we make the process open, transparent, and competitive? How do you maintain trust and confidence?
Yeah, looks like we have a technical glitch right there. All right, Mr. Ola. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Latu. I lost you for a bit.
Yeah, I was saying that, for example, if you look at some other countries that also is there, in Saudi Arabia, you also countries that have oil like the UK, they have more patronage.
All right, I think that's all right. Unfortunately, I do not think we'll be able to take Mr. Latuyi. But I mean, issue of governance and trust. If we want to attract investors, obviously, the investment climate has to be predictable, has to be certain, and not changes that investors cannot predict. And that's obviously, so even though we are making we have attracted $460,000 to the oil and gas sector, the potential is $20 billion. So you can imagine what we are missing, and we do hope that things can be put right to give investors, both domestic and foreign, the confidence to come to the oil and gas sector. Thank you so much, Mr. Jide Olatuyi, Managing Director, Policy Management Consult Services, for your time and your views on the program. We'll take a break now. When we come back on the program, we will tell you what the Chartered Institute of Directors are doing. And then it's all about AI, digital education, and knowledge. But can we turn that to revenue? We'll discuss that also after the break here on Business Morning. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning right here on Channels Television. The Chartered Institute of Directors really believe in the EFCFTA, but they also believe that diplomacy and strategy are kind of missing in achieving the market, hitting that market target of over 1.3 billion, which the continent holds. And so they had a meeting to discuss that. It's a gathering that represents the apex of corporate leadership in Nigeria's private sector. The Chartered Institute of Directors, the convener of this luncheon, say it's a necessity because of the unique volatility realities of today. And so directors at the crossroads of diplomacy, trade, and corporate strategy is a much needed conversation.
Today, corporate leaders must possess diplomatic acumen. We must understand how shifting geopolitical alliances, regional trades, pacts, and international sections impact our businesses. 2. Trade has transformed from a simple matter of logistics and supply chain, into a complete puzzle of resource nationalism, regional protectionism, and digital integration.
The African Continental Free Trade Area presents an unprecedented opportunity, a single market of over 1.3 billion people with a combined GDP exceeding $3 trillion. Yet, translating the legal frameworks of trade pacts into active corporate growth requires deliberate boardroom leadership.
The chairman of Standard Chartered Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Folusho Phillips, drives the theme home with examples which the world is currently experiencing.
The visit you make when you want something, it is a discipline of sustained presence, sustained generosity, and sustained interest in the affairs and well-being of the people and institutions you need to trust you.
For the directors, this meeting would be a success when the theme translates to less trade barriers and duties, especially among African countries through the African Continental Free Trade Area. And so we will continue to preach the message of AfCFTA until we hit the max of that 1.3 billion market. Another way we can do that is through digital literacy, but we start from home here and see our level of digital literacy. Data indicates that approximately 50% of Nigerians are literate, digitally literate. But the target is to hit 70% by 2027 and 95% of that by 2030. Also, approximately 68% of Nigerians can currently use smartphones at basic level. About 39% are capable of operating laptops and tablets. National internet penetration, which is the foundation of all of this, is about 50 to 55%. Over 100 million active internet users are currently in Nigeria. Now, the World Bank estimates that by 2030, nearly 45% of all jobs in Nigeria will require digital skills. So if you don't want to be left out, it's time to wake up and go beyond the basics. And that's part of what we'll be discussing with Dr. Samson Olatunde. He's the founder, Knowledge Digest Africa, right here in the studio. Dr. Olatunde, how do we turn, yes, we know we haven't hit our peak yet when we talk about the number of Nigerians that are digitally literate and all of that. But would you say we have maximized even the 45% of Nigeria's population that are digitally literate?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. There's a lot that needs to be done. I think we need to first look at the fundamentals. We need to look at it from the foundation aspect of it. And this is where we need to now go back to the curriculum, right? Because if you're going to solve the major problem about what we are facing, we have underemployment, we have some people that are overemployment, we have people that they are not even skillful enough to be able to get access to a lot of opportunities that we have here. And things are really changing. So you can't say because you are in Nigeria, you're not going to understand what is happening in the global space. And so this is where we need to have a dialogue about our curriculum system, right? Because we need to get back to the basis of the grassroots. I'm talking about what happens from the primary school to secondary school. I mean, the secondary school is critical at this stage. Do we have the curriculum having the way of us thinking about having digital educational skill sets, right? Where you have a curriculum where you have to take a compulsory course and you begin to learn. I mean, so if I start coding from secondary school, it becomes easier for me when I get to university.
I think coding starts earlier than secondary school now.
I mean, we're talking about even, let's even say we don't want to go through the primary school, because that's where you should start from the primary school, and then you cascade into the secondary school, and then it's easier for you to get that pathway when you get to the university. I mean, you must have read different story of people study a particular course, and that's not what they are doing in the market space. I mean, in the career pathway. That's because there's no build-up system. People are confused about, I mean, where to go to from.
But Dr. Latunde, we've had a lot of changes in our education sector in the past few years, at least under this administration. We've had a lot of talks about changing curriculum and to adapt to the realities of today. Are you saying those are not enough, or are they just on paper?
So we need to look at the practicality of it. We need to look at the review system. I mean, so there's one thing to say that we have trained such a number of people. There's another thing to say in the practicality of how many people have been gainfully employed or have the enterprising skill set for them to start and initiate their idea into talent building, and then they can use the skill sets. So for instance, let's take it practically. I mean, when I was in school, people that studied computer science didn't have access to computer system. Now, it's becoming better off, but if you look at it from the government institution and you look at it from the private institution, you have more edge in the private institution. That's because people are paying heavily to be able to have access practically. How do we integrate the practicality of this? How do we bring in the public-private conversation in terms of collaboration? Because you can also have the, just like you call it excursion tour. I mean, I can decide to take people. I mean, just like you have in the secondary school, primary school, can we begin to have that kind of system even in the higher institution where you have access to visit a working system practicalization of an institution that make use of the digital tools in real time? I mean, just look at what is happening.
Dr. Latunde, we had a youth forum, and sorry to interrupt you, because we don't have a lot of time. I want to cover some grounds. We had a youth forum recently in Channels TV, May 29 to be precise. So we had employers, we had the youths, we had the ministers for education and youth, and all of that. And some companies say already they are open to having students come and bridge that gap between the knowledge they got
like an internship,
school,
like mentorship. That is
I've also heard of some parents who are looking for where their secondary school children can intern. So don't you think that perhaps we are already on a path to recover some of the time we have lost?
I completely agree with you. We're already on the pathway. We just need to scale. I mean, that's what is important, and we need to have more of the
But it looks
NGOs.
like most of these things are happening in the private school, not in the public school.
This is where I'm coming to. So if I don't have money to get into the private institution, what happens to the federal, state, primary school, universities that we have? This is where we need this partnership. I saw the recent move by Money Point. I mean, trying to establish platforms in different 3 universities to make things happen. How many of that can we have more? I already know that there's New Horizon, I mean, going to partner with different private institutions. How many of that can we have in the government institution? That's very key, because the majority of people that we are talking about that have this gap, they are more in the government institution that we are talking about. So, I mean, there's a part of infrastructure, there's a part of partnership in terms of having a collaboration, there's a part of the funding system. I mean, adequately, I run a business. So there's a lot of things that should be basic for me to enjoy and make my business work. I can get into the mall, I can get into the classroom and get the infrastructure of internet working. We need that to happen. You can't get to an open space and have access to internet. You can't get to the airport and have access to internet. I mean, I'm talking about practicality. This is where infrastructure needs to come in. We're talking about power system. This is where we also need to think about how do we have a steady power supply. I mean, so if we're integrating solar system, how is is it effective?
So you're saying that if the government would provide the basic infrastructures,
it makes the work easier.
Then the corporate social responsibility can now come more from...
and amplify and scale it up. Right? And then we can begin to see the practicality of this. So if we have the curriculum system already integrated, how do we now begin to practicalize this? So that when I get out of school, I either decide to work in an organization because I have the practical knowledge and skill set, or I decide to start something of my own because I have the knowledge that has been, acquired in the course of my primary, secondary school and higher institution. This is where we have the gap. Right, because we have a lot of people that are graduates getting out of the university and institutions, and we have a lot of jobs, but the knowledge, the competence is what we don't have.
All right, well, as you and I have acknowledged, it seems like there are some changes going on. We just need to scale up.
Yeah.
And then government needs to provide the basic infrastructure so that the private sector can take it up from there. Thank you so much, Dr. Samson Olatunde, founder, Knowledge Digest Africa. Let's continue to preach this message.
We will.
And hopefully one day we'll see the light.
I believe so. Thank you so much.
All right. Let's head to the global space now with Anita Edits.
It's a pleasant Thursday morning here in Lagos, Nigeria, and it's time for global news. And we're starting first with the U.S. and Iran. Well, the back and forth between these two countries, which is this is a third month, has continued. So both of them exchanged military strikes across the Middle East for a second consecutive day, further straining a shaky ceasefire earlier agreed between the two countries in April. Now, this comes hours after President Donald Trump vowed that U.S. forces would hit Iran hard, after citing that Tehran had taken too long to make a deal to end the war permanently. Now, meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRCG, says it had hit two tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz shortly after state media reported that it was completely closed to all types of vessels. However, the U.S. Central Command, that's CENTCOM, says commercial ships are continuing to transit in and out of the crucial shipping channel. Now let's move over to the ECB, where the European Central Bank is set to raise its interest rate. That's the very first time since 2023. And this is coming as the Monetary Policy Committee prepares to meet today, later today in Brussels. Now, the ECB's latest decision meeting, which is expected to draw a 25 basis points increase in its key interest rates, is coming amid the ongoing Iran and U.S. conflict, which has pushed up global energy prices. Now, the anticipated rate hike, which will be the ECB's first in 3 years, is also coming as the Eurozone's headline inflation rose to 3.2% in April due to high energy prices, while core inflation rose to 2.5%, primarily driven by higher services costs, which could be the first signs of second-round effects for that economy. Now, major financial markets are expected to react to the rate decision, which will be announced later today at 1 p.m. Nigerian time. Now, let's move over to the German industry, that's the German auto industry, where Mercedes-Benz, that's the German car giant, has announced a partnership with its German contemporary, that's German startup Titan Technologies, to produce anti-drone vehicles, becoming the latest automaker to join forces with the country's defense industry. Now, both parties signed a memorandum of understanding at an international aerospace exhibition, that's the ILA 2026, under which it will produce vehicles from a mobile air defense system to target small drones. A statement by the auto giant said it will focus on vehicle-based drone defense and mission platforms for the protection of people and critical infrastructure based on the G-Class and Sprinter models. Now, other European car makers such as Volkswagen and Renault had recently signed deals to produce parts for vehicle missile defense systems. Now let's move over to Canada, where the Canadian government has introduced a legislation to Parliament that could ban children younger than 16 years from having social media accounts unless the companies show that they can make the platform safe. Now, Canada's Culture Minister, Mark Miller, who made this known, says a digital safety commission will be created, while a criteria for what exemptions would look like will be announced at a later date. He explained that setting up the regulator could take up to 18 months. Now, Canada is joining a growing global effort to tighten online security for children. Countries including Australia, Brazil, and Indonesia have introduced or announced age-based restriction or requirement for children's access to social media. Others, including Britain, France, and Spain, Denmark, Thailand, and South Korea, are studying or developing similar approaches. Now let's go over to commodity market, where copper prices have dropped for a third day to 3-week low, falling to $13,378 per ton. Now this comes largely on the back of latest military hostilities between the US and Iran, which has raised concerns over faster inflation, higher interest rates, and slower economic growth. Now, the red metal came under pressure despite tightening inventories, with traders focusing on the potential impact of prolonged geopolitical tensions, higher energy costs, and slower industrial demand growth. Okay, so now let's go over to UK, where the ministers are expected to drop some planned tariff on foreign steel after UK manufacturers said the measures would significantly increase their cost. A statement from the Department for Business and Trade, business representatives are currently holding a two-day meeting with leaders of steel trading business groups with a view to finalizing details of a reprieve for certain industries. Now, the government had earlier announced in March this year that it was doubling tariffs on steel imports to 50% and reducing quotas by up to 60% in an attempt to save UK producers. Now, the new tariffs and quotas are expected to be in place by the 1st of July. And finally, on global news, Chinese car maker BYD says it aims to be the world's biggest automaker within the next 5 years, as it targets more than 40% sales increase, or about 1.5 million vehicles to sell overseas this year. Now, targeting Toyota's long-held top spot, BYD's founder and chair, Wang Jianfu, expressed confidence that the Chinese electric vehicle maker could overtake global rivals through rapid advances in battery technology and fast charging, as well as growing production overseas, including Europe. Now, the company, which is based in southern China, overtook US EV maker Tesla last year as the world's biggest electric vehicle maker by sales. In May this year, it sold more than 160,000 vehicles abroad, and that's up from 80% in the year before in 2025. Now, meanwhile, Toyota retained its crown as the world's top-selling car maker with about 11.3 vehicles sold, while BYD sold about 4.8 million units. That's global news for Thursday. I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Anita. And as we head home from Business Morning, we'll take you to the markets and to see that the green color is retained, but it's too slight to celebrate. 0.01%. That's really risky. Anything can happen. So what we would do is that we'll watch the market. Anita there to be back at 1:30 to give you updates on that, and we'll see if we're in a more stable place at that point. But at this time, it's still a bit of good news. FCMB from yesterday, Fidelity Bank also on the gaining side, Nigerian Exchange, the NGX Group itself is positive, ABC Transport and Deep Capital also from yesterday, they've retained that. And then on the loser side, Total Nigeria, International Energy Insurance, and Geregu are still facing a lot of profit taking. We'll see what the numbers look like at 1:30 when Anita edits. We'll be back. I'm Ini John Mekwa, wishing you the best of the rest of the day. Bye-bye.